Her billionaire husband came home drunk at 3 a.m. and fell to his knees. "Forgive me now, because at 10 a.m. you'll never be able to." She asked what he did. He sobbed. "Your best friend scheduled lunch with you at 10 a.m. She went. She put an envelope on the table and said, "I'm the one who's... Don't miss chapter 9. This will be the best story of your life." Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter's Stories, your very own family story channel. May the Almighty bless every woman with unshakable strength, a heart overflowing with love, and a spirit that inspires everyone around her. May your life be filled with peace, your home with harmony, and your every step guided by blessings that never end. You are the pillars of this world, the silent warriors who carry families on your shoulders, the source of light and hope for all who know you. May every joy find you, every sorrow fade, and every dream you hold be nurtured and fulfilled. May love, respect, and honor always surround you, and may your days be as radiant as your soul. If your heart is true, like the video. If your love is real, write, "I am with Mr. Peter." The sound of shattering glass ripped Florence Joyner from sleep at 3 in the morning, pulling her from dreams into a nightmare that was somehow worse than anything her unconscious mind could create. She sat up in their California king bed, silk sheets pooling around her waist, listening to the chaos erupting downstairs in their marble foyer. Another crash echoed through the house, the distinct sound of expensive crystal meeting imported Italian marble with enough force to pulverize it into dust. Then came the sound that made her blood run cold and her heart stop in her chest, her husband's voice, broken and sobbing like a wounded animal, calling her name like a dying prayer to a God who'd already abandoned him. Florence rose from the bed slowly, deliberately, wrapping herself in a champagne silk robe that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She moved to the bedroom door and opened it with steady hands, standing at the top of the curved staircase that overlooked their marble foyer like a queen surveying her kingdom. The chandelier cast prismatic light across the scene below, thousands of crystals catching and reflecting the light, and what she saw would have made a weaker woman gasp in shock or horror or fear. Matthew Gilkes, her husband of 6 years, billionaire real estate developer, the man who once carried her over this very threshold while she laughed with joy, was crawling across their imported Italian marble on his hands and knees like an animal. His $3,000 Tom Ford suit was torn at the shoulder seam, the collar stained with lipstick that definitely wasn't her shade of red. He reeked of bourbon and desperation even from 20 feet away. The smell of expensive alcohol mixed with fear sweat, creating a nauseating combination that filled the entire foyer. He looked up through bloodshot eyes and saw her standing there at the top of the stairs, backlit by the bedroom light like an avenging angel descending from heaven to deliver judgment, and something in his face shattered completely. Whatever composure he'd been clinging to dissolved like sugar in water. "Florence," he choked out, dragging himself toward the stairs like a wounded soldier crawling toward safety that didn't exist. "Baby, please, you have to forgive me. Right now. You have to forgive me right now before it's too late." Florence descended one step. Just one. Her bare feet made no sound on the cold marble. Her face was absolutely expressionless, carved from stone, giving away nothing of what she was thinking or feeling or planning. She'd practiced this expression in the mirror for weeks. "Forgive you for what, Matthew?" He collapsed at the bottom of the stairs, reaching up toward her with shaking hands covered in scraped knuckles from where he'd fallen outside. His fingers didn't even brush her feet, falling short by inches that might as well have been miles. "Please, please, baby, forgive me now, before tomorrow. Before 10 in the morning. You have to forgive me before 10 tomorrow morning, or it's over. Everything is over. Our marriage, our life, everything we built." Florence took another step down, then another, slow, measured, like she had all the time in the world, like watching her husband crawl and beg and fall apart was the most natural thing she'd ever witnessed. "Why 10 in the morning, darling? What happens at 10 that's so important?" Matthew's face crumpled like paper thrown into a fire, every feature collapsing at once. Gabrielle called me tonight. She's breaking down. She can't live with the guilt anymore. She scheduled lunch with you tomorrow morning at 10 to confess everything about us. He was sobbing openly now, tears and snot mixing on his designer shirt. His perfect hair destroyed by his own desperate hands running through it over and over. She's going to tell you about the affair, about everything we've done behind your back for months. Baby, please, I'm begging you on my knees. Forgive me now before she poisons you against me forever, before she tells you things that will make you hate me, before everything is destroyed. Florence reached the bottom step. She stood there looking down at her husband the way someone might observe an interesting insect specimen pinned under glass, with detached scientific curiosity and not an ounce of emotional involvement. Then slowly, deliberately, she smiled. It was the kind of smile that made the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees, the kind of smile that promised pain. "Matthew," she said, her voice soft as silk and sharp as surgical steel. "Darling, sweetheart, my beloved husband." She paused, letting him hope for just a moment. "I already know." The color drained from his face so fast she thought he might actually faint right there on their expensive imported marble that had cost them $50,000 to install. "I've known for months," she continued, walking past him to the bar in the living room, stepping over his outstretched hand like it was just another piece of furniture. Her movements were unhurried, graceful, like she was gliding across a stage performing a rehearsed dance she'd perfected over weeks of practice. She poured herself 2 fingers of whiskey, his favorite bottle, the one that cost $800 and came from some exclusive Scottish distillery he'd spent 20 minutes telling their friends about at their last dinner party. "Every hotel room you paid for with our credit cards, every lie you told me about working late, every text message where you told her she was better than me, every single time you left our bed at midnight claiming you had insomnia and went straight to her apartment across town." She took a slow sip, savoring both the burn of expensive liquor sliding down her throat and the look of absolute horror spreading across his face like spilled ink. "Room 847 at the Harrington Hotel where you went every Tuesday. Room 302 at the Peninsula where you spent our anniversary weekend while telling me you were at a conference in Chicago. That little boutique place in Malibu you thought I'd never find out about because you paid cash and used the fake name Michael Grant." Matthew tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't support his weight. They buckled beneath him, and he fell back to his knees. Then he vomited on their marble floor, all that expensive bourbon coming back up mixed with fear and realization and the complete destruction of his entire world. Florence watched with detached fascination like she was watching a particularly interesting documentary about the mating habits of insects. She didn't flinch or look away or show any sign of disgust. Just watched him purge himself and wondered distantly if this was what catharsis looked like, if this was the moment when everything finally became real for him. "And sweetheart?" She set her glass down with a delicate clink that echoed in the suddenly silent house. "Gabrielle didn't schedule that lunch with me. I did. I called her this afternoon and told her that if she didn't confess to me in person tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock sharp, I'd send everything I have, and I have everything, Matthew, to her husband Derek, her boss Reginald at the marketing firm, where she's up for a promotion that would double her salary, and her parents who are so proud of their perfect daughter who married well and has such a successful career." She tilted her head slightly, studying him like a puzzle she'd already solved weeks ago. "She thinks she's about to save her marriage by being honest with me. She thinks confession will repair our friendship with the truth. She thinks if she just comes clean, she can take control of the narrative before you could spin it your way." Florence walked back to where Matthew was now on all fours, one hand braced against the floor to hold himself up, the other covering his mouth as he fought not to vomit again. She crouched down beside him in her expensive silk robe, elegant even in this position with her robe pooling perfectly around her like she'd posed for a photograph, and whispered in his ear with the intimacy of a lover sharing secrets. She has absolutely no idea what's waiting for her at that restaurant tomorrow at 10. No idea what I've already sent to Derek this afternoon at 4 while you were inside her for what I made sure would be the last time. No idea that her entire life was destroyed hours ago. Her marriage ended at 4:05 when Derek opened my email. Her job ended at 4:30 when her boss received the same documentation. Her reputation in her family ended at 5 when her parents saw photographs of their daughter in bed with a married man. All of it gone while she was underneath you, thinking she still had power, thinking she still had choices, thinking she could control anything at all. Matthew looked up at his wife like he was seeing a complete stranger wearing Florence's face. His beautiful wife who smiled at his jokes. His perfect wife who supported his business deals without question. His trusting wife who never demanded to know where he was or who he was with. That woman was gone. In her place was someone he didn't recognize at all. "How long?" he managed to whisper through the bile coating his throat, making his voice sound strangled and desperate. "How long have you known about us?" Florence stood up, brushing invisible dust from her silk robe, with movements so precise they looked choreographed. "Long enough to move money into offshore accounts you don't know exist. Long enough to copy every file from your computer while you slept beside me dreaming about her. Long enough to befriend your business partners at charity galas and make them trust me more than they trust you. And they do trust me more, Matthew. They told me so. Long enough to document everything with the best investigator money can buy." She started walking toward the stairs, each step deliberate and measured and final. "Long enough to hire lawyers who make your lawyers look like children playing dress-up. Long enough to build a case so airtight that your attorneys will tell you to just surrender and hope for mercy that won't come." "Florence, wait, please just listen to me for 1 minute." She stopped but didn't turn around. Her silhouette on the stairs looked carved from marble, backlit by the chandelier above, casting a long shadow across the foyer that seemed to swallow him whole. "Clean that up. Then pack a bag with whatever clothes you need for work. You have until sunrise before I destroy both of your pathetic lives so completely that there won't be anything left but ashes and regret and the memory of what you threw away." She took one step up the stairs. "The guest house is available if you need somewhere to sleep tonight. The main house is mine now. Touch anything in here that belongs to me, and I'll add theft to the list of your sins. Take anything that I bought or that we bought together, and I'll have you arrested before you reach the end of the driveway." "Baby, please just listen to me for 1 second. Don't call me baby." Her voice could have frozen fire, could have stopped time itself, could have shattered diamonds. "You lost that right the first time you put your hands on her body, the first time you kissed her mouth, the first time you chose her over the woman who loved you unconditionally, the woman who would have walked through fire for you, the woman who defended you to everyone who questioned whether you were good enough for her." She walked upstairs without looking back, each step measured and deliberate and final as a funeral march. Behind her, Matthew Gilkes, billionaire, charmer, the man who'd once made her laugh until she cried tears of joy, stayed on his hands and knees, scrubbing his own vomit off their marble floor with his $1,000 Armani suit jacket, the jacket she'd bought him for their 5th anniversary last year. He was finally beginning to understand that his wife hadn't just discovered his betrayal. She'd weaponized it. She'd turned his infidelity into a scalpel and was about to perform surgery on his entire existence without anesthesia, without mercy, without any of the softness and forgiveness he'd taken for granted for 6 years. Upstairs, Florence locked her bedroom door with shaking hands and walked to her window overlooking the canyon where city lights glittered below like fallen stars. She could see Matthew's silhouette through the downstairs windows, still on the floor, still broken, still trying to clean up the mess he'd made of their marble and their marriage and their entire life together. She felt nothing watching him suffer down there in the wreckage of his own choices. Not satisfaction, not grief, not vindication, not even anger anymore. Nothing at all. She'd cried every tear months ago when the truth first landed in her lap like a bomb with a timer counting down, when she'd seen the first hotel receipt forgotten in his jacket pocket. The first text message that popped up on his phone while he was in the shower. The first photograph that confirmed what her gut had been screaming for weeks. Now she was just cold, calculated, precise. Every move planned weeks in advance. Every word scripted and rehearsed. Every outcome predetermined, like a chess master seeing 20 moves ahead. She touched her lower abdomen gently, protectively, where a secret grew that Matthew didn't even know existed yet. She was barely along, early enough that she wasn't showing at all, early enough that only she and her doctor knew the truth. A secret she'd keep locked away until the perfect moment arrived to deploy it like the nuclear weapon it was. Tomorrow morning at 10, Gabrielle would walk into Bistro Lavande, thinking she was about to control the narrative, thinking confession would somehow save her marriage and her friendship. She had no idea that Florence had already written the ending to this story months ago, had cast every role with precision, had directed every scene with the eye of a master filmmaker, had rehearsed every moment in her mind until the performance was absolutely perfect. Tomorrow morning at 10, the real show would begin. The performance Florence had been preparing for since the day she'd hired Morgan Reed and decided to become someone new. And Florence Joyner never directed anything less than a masterpiece. She looked at her reflection in the darkened window, her beautiful face with skin like polished mahogany, her expensive robe, her perfect hair barely mussed from sleep. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her with cold eyes. 3 months ago, she'd been softer, warmer. She'd believed in forever and happy endings and the sanctity of marriage vows spoken in front of 300 witnesses. Now she was something else entirely, something harder than diamonds, something dangerous as a loaded gun, something that didn't blink or break or bend, something that Matthew Gilkes had created when he destroyed the woman who loved him more than her own life. She hoped he was ready for what came next, because Florence had stopped playing by any rules except her own, and her rules were absolute. Chapter 2. The Woman Who Became a Weapon. 3 months earlier, Florence had stood in front of the city council in a tailored navy Armani suit that cost more than some people's cars, presenting her revolutionary mixed-use development design that would fundamentally change the downtown skyline forever and cement her legacy as one of the great architects of her generation. She'd been magnificent that evening, absolutely commanding. Every single council member hung on her words as she walked them through architectural renderings that seamlessly blended affordable housing with luxury retail spaces, green roofs with community gardens, environmental sustainability with financial profitability. This was her masterwork, the project she'd been designing in her mind since graduate school, the project that would put her name in architectural textbooks alongside the greats, the project that would prove she belonged in the same conversation as Frank Lloyd Wright and Zaha Hadid and I.M. Pei. When she finished her 40-minute presentation, the council chambers erupted in applause that lasted a full minute. The council voted unanimously to approve her design without a single modification or question. Florence shook hands with council members and reporters who wanted quotes, accepted congratulations from colleagues who'd come to support her, and felt that rare, perfect moment when everything in her life aligned exactly right, like planets in a perfect orbit. Her career was soaring higher than she'd ever dreamed possible. Her marriage was solid as granite, or so she'd believed. Her future stretched ahead, bright and limitless and full of possibilities. She checked her phone in the parking garage after the meeting finally ended just after 9. 7 missed calls from Matthew. 1 voicemail waiting. She pressed play while unlocking her silver Mercedes, already smiling because maybe he'd heard about the council approval already through their network of friends. Maybe he was calling to congratulate her on the biggest triumph of her professional life. "Hey babe, working late again tonight at the office. Don't wait up for me. Love you." Florence stared at her phone screen, looked at the timestamp on the voicemail, 6:30 in the evening. But her presentation had started at 7 and gone until 9. Matthew had called her during her presentation, during the most important presentation of her entire career, to tell her he was working late at the office. Something cold settled in her stomach, like a stone dropping into still water. She drove to his downtown office building, telling herself she was being paranoid and ridiculous, that there was a perfectly reasonable explanation for everything. His black Tesla with the custom rims he'd just installed wasn't in his reserved executive parking spot on the third floor. She checked their favorite restaurants, thinking maybe he'd gone to grab dinner before heading back to finish working. Nothing. His car wasn't anywhere. She tried calling him directly, straight to voicemail like he'd turned his phone off completely. Then she saw it, driving past the Harrington Hotel on her way home. Matthew's distinctive Tesla with those flashy custom rims in the hotel parking garage, sitting there bold as brass like he didn't even care about hiding it. Florence could have stormed inside right that very moment, caught them in the act, made a dramatic scene, confronted him in some hotel room with another woman wrapped around him, and destroyed everything in a moment of righteous rage and justified hurt and betrayal. But Florence was an architect. She built things with precision and planning, with careful measurements, with unshakable foundations that could withstand earthquakes. She designed structures that lasted centuries. She didn't storm anywhere. She didn't make impulsive decisions based on emotion. She calculated. She measured. She planned with the patience of someone who understood that great things took time. She drove home slowly, carefully, her hands perfectly steady on the wheel, even though her heart was pounding hard enough to crack ribs. She walked into their empty house that suddenly felt like a museum full of artifacts from a marriage that had died without her noticing, poured herself a large glass of expensive Pinot Noir, opened her laptop with hands that didn't shake even though everything inside her was screaming, and she hired Morgan Reed, the most ruthless private investigator in the entire state, a woman with a reputation for taking no prisoners and asking no questions and getting results that held up in court. A woman who'd once been a decorated detective before going private and making 3 times as much money, doing the same work without bureaucratic restrictions. "I need everything," Florence told Morgan over the phone at 11 that night, her voice cold and professional like she was ordering office supplies or scheduling a routine appointment. "And I need it courtroom ready. Documents that will hold up under cross-examination, photographs with timestamps, recordings with clean audio, everything that would convince a judge if this ever goes to trial." 2 weeks later, 14 days of Florence going through the motions of her marriage while dying inside, Morgan delivered a file thick as a Bible to Florence's office downtown. Florence had dismissed her assistant Emily early that afternoon, locked her office door with shaking hands, closed the blinds on her windows overlooking the city, and opened the file with steady hands that contradicted the screaming panic inside her chest. It was so much worse than she'd imagined in her darkest moments. Matthew and Gabrielle had been having an affair for months. 7 months to be exact. It had started at Florence's own birthday party back in the spring, when Florence had left early with violent food poisoning that had her vomiting every 20 minutes. While Florence was home alone hugging the toilet and wishing she was dead, her husband and her supposed best friend had stayed behind at the party, gotten drunk on champagne that Florence had paid for, and ended up having sex in the guest bedroom of the house where the party was being thrown. Hotel receipts going back 7 months, sometimes 3 times a week. Text messages that made Florence's stomach turn with their casual cruelty and their intimate details. Photographs that would be burned into her memory forever. Matthew and Gabrielle tangled in hotel sheets in the front seat of his car at a romantic weekend getaway in wine country. One text message from Gabrielle to Matthew jumped off the page like it was written in fire. "She's so obsessed with her buildings and her projects, she doesn't even notice I'm building a life with you, ha ha. Does she even know you're alive? Does she even care about anything except her precious career?" Florence read that text 3 times, each time feeling something inside her chest turn harder and colder. Then she closed the file carefully, stood up from her expensive ergonomic desk chair, walked to her private office bathroom, locked the door behind her, and stared at her reflection in the mirror for a full 5 minutes. She didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't break a single thing, even though her office was full of expensive objects she could have thrown against the walls. Didn't collapse, Didn't call her mother or her sister or anyone who might tell her to calm down or give him another chance or suggest couples therapy. She just looked at herself in that mirror and made a decision with the same precision and clarity she brought to designing 40-story buildings. She would destroy them both, methodically, completely, without mercy or hesitation. She went back to her desk, opened a new spreadsheet with columns and rows, and started moving money with the systematic efficiency of someone executing a carefully designed plan. Over the following weeks, Florence became a ghost in her own marriage. She was physically present at dinners and social events, sitting beside Matthew and smiling at his jokes, but emotionally, she was completely gone. She'd vacated the premises while her body continued going through familiar motions. She watched everything with the cold calculation of a surgeon planning a complex operation where one wrong cut could be fatal. She documented every asset they owned together, every investment, every account, every piece of property. She befriended Matthew's business rivals at charity galas with champagne in hand, made herself invaluable and trustworthy to his partners by being brilliant and charming, positioned herself as the reasonable one, the brilliant one, the one people would side with when everything inevitably fell apart in flames. She recorded phone calls with an app Morgan had recommended, saved text messages to secure cloud storage, built a case that would be absolutely airtight and devastating, collected evidence like she was preparing for war, because she was. Matthew didn't notice she was different. He was too busy texting Gabrielle during dinner while Florence picked at her food across from him. Too distracted to notice that his wife had stopped initiating intimacy. Too self-absorbed to realize that Florence was watching him like a scientist, observing a lab rat, navigating a maze toward inevitable destruction. 3 weeks into her systematic surveillance and careful planning, Florence went to her doctor for her annual checkup. Just routine, just a regular Wednesday afternoon appointment she'd had scheduled for months. The doctor came back into the examination room with news that stopped Florence's heart completely. She was pregnant. Early. Very early. Probably conceived during one of their last intimate nights together before she discovered the truth about his affair. Before her world had shattered into a million pieces. Florence sat in that sterile examination room with harsh fluorescent lighting, hand trembling as she held the positive pregnancy test and felt her entire world tilt sideways on its axis. She could end this pregnancy. No one would ever know. She could cut every tie to Matthew completely and start over fresh. She could pretend this never happened. But as she sat there in that paper gown, hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach, something fierce and protective rose in her chest like a tidal wave. This baby hadn't done anything wrong. This baby was innocent in all of this. This baby was hers. Hers alone. Not Matthew's, really. He'd already chosen to blow up their family with his selfish choices. This child would be Florence's second chance, her reason to keep going when grief tried to drown her, her future when her past was burning. She made a decision right then in that examination room with motivational posters about healthy eating on the walls. She would have this baby. She would destroy Matthew systematically and completely, and he wouldn't know about either decision until she decided he deserved to know. She threw away the positive test in the bathroom trash can, walked out of that doctor's office with her head high and her shoulders back, got in her car with steady hands, and called Gabrielle. "Hey, girl," Florence said, her voice warm and friendly and completely convincing, like nothing was wrong at all. "I feel like we haven't really connected in forever. Want to grab lunch next month? I miss my best friend so much." Gabrielle had been paranoid and guilty. Florence could hear it clearly in every word she spoke. But she'd agreed immediately with obvious relief, relieved that Florence suspected nothing, relieved that her secret was still safe and locked away. "Absolutely," Gabrielle had said, nearly crying with relief that Florence was clueless. "I miss you too, Florence. Let's definitely do lunch soon. I have so much to tell you." Florence had hung up the phone, opened her calendar app, and marked the date for their lunch meeting exactly 3 months away. The perfect amount of time to finish building her airtight case, to document everything down to the smallest detail, to position every piece exactly where it needed to be before she burned their lives down to ashes. In her office that day, Florence had looked at the framed photograph of her and Matthew on her desk, their wedding day 6 years ago, both of them smiling with genuine joy, both of them believing in forever and happy endings. She'd taken that photograph and put it in her drawer face down, where she wouldn't have to see those naive, smiling faces anymore. The woman in that photograph didn't exist anymore. That woman was soft and trusting and believed in the goodness of people. Florence had killed her the day she'd opened Morgan's devastating file, and in her place was someone new, someone harder than steel, someone capable of absolutely anything, someone who would protect herself and her unborn child with ruthless efficiency, someone Matthew Gilkis should have been absolutely terrified of becoming, but he had no idea what was coming. And that was exactly how Florence wanted it. Chapter 3. The lunch that shattered everything. Florence walked into Bistro Lavande at exactly 10 in the morning wearing all white. White Chanel suit, white Louboutin heels, white Hermes purse. She looked like an avenging angel descending from heaven to deliver final judgment on the wicked, or maybe she looked like death itself, dressed in the color of innocence and purity to mock the guilty. Gabrielle was already sitting at the corner table Florence had specifically requested when making the reservation, red-eyed and visibly shaking, wearing too much makeup in a desperate attempt to hide the fact she'd been crying all night long. There was a cream-colored envelope on the table in front of Gabrielle, her confession letter that Florence had demanded she bring, the letter where she would supposedly honestly explain everything about her affair with Matthew. Florence sat gracefully across from her former best friend, crossing her legs and placing her white purse on the empty chair beside her with deliberate precision. She ordered sparkling water with lemon from the hovering waiter, who looked nervous about the obvious tension at the table. She didn't rush into anything, didn't acknowledge Gabrielle's obvious distress. Just let her sit there drowning in anxiety and guilt and fear while Florence buttered a piece of warm bread from the basket slowly, took a small bite, chewed thoroughly, dabbed her mouth with her linen napkin with perfect etiquette. Gabrielle started stammering before Florence had even swallowed her bread. "Florence, there's something I need to tell you that's been absolutely killing me inside for months now." Florence held up one perfectly manicured finger with blood-red nail polish. Silence. Complete and total silence. Gabrielle's mouth snapped shut like a trap, slamming closed. A different waiter brought fresh bread to the table, replacing the basket. Florence selected another piece with care, buttered it slowly with movements so deliberate they looked choreographed. Took a bite, chewed, swallowed, dabbed her mouth again. The silence stretched like pulled taffy, becoming uncomfortable, then unbearable, then absolutely excruciating. Then she spoke, her voice as calm as a frozen lake in winter. "Let me save you the dramatic performance, Gabrielle. You've been sleeping with my husband for 7 months. It started at my birthday party back in the spring when I left early with food poisoning. You borrowed my guest bathroom to shower after having sex with him. You borrowed my car twice to meet him at hotels when yours was in the shop. My car, Gabrielle, the Mercedes I trusted you with. You drove it to go have sex with my husband. You even wore the diamond tennis bracelet he bought you with our money. With money from our joint account, to my charity gala 3 weeks ago, and I complimented it, and you thanked me." Gabrielle's face collapsed like a demolished building, every feature crumbling at once in slow motion. Florence continued without any emotion in her voice whatsoever, like she was reading ingredients from a cereal box. "You told him I was cold in bed and didn't satisfy him sexually. You told him I cared more about my architecture career than him. You told him that marrying me was his biggest mistake, and that he should have chosen someone more supportive and feminine and less ambitious like you instead." She slid her own envelope across the white tablecloth with 2 fingers, the movement elegant and final. "Open it. Now." Gabrielle's hands shook so violently she could barely grip the envelope. Her fingernails, perfectly manicured and painted coral pink, scratched against the paper as she tried to open it with trembling fingers. Inside, printed text messages between her and Matthew going back 7 months, dozens of them highlighted in yellow. Every cruel thing they'd said about Florence, every intimate detail they'd shared, every plan they'd made. Photographs of Gabrielle and Matthew tangled in hotel sheets, his face visible and clear, her face visible and clear, nothing left to deny or explain away. Hotel receipts, including one from Florence and Matthew's 6th wedding anniversary weekend, when he'd claimed he was at a critical 3-day real estate conference in Chicago. Bank statements showing money systematically withdrawn from Florence and Matthew's joint vacation fund to pay for a romantic weekend getaway with Gabrielle in Napa wine country, where they'd stayed at a 5-star resort. Gabrielle looked up with mascara running black rivers down her face like war paint melting in rain. "Florence, please, I can explain all of this if you just give me a chance. Your husband Derek received these exact same copies this morning at 8 when I hand-delivered them to his office. Your boss Reginald at the marketing firm received them at 8:30 by courier. Your parents received them at 9 by registered mail requiring a signature." Florence leaned forward slightly, voice still eerily calm and measured, like she was discussing the weather. "Derek is filing for divorce as we sit here. His attorney is drawing up papers right now. Your boss fired you an hour ago. Check your email if you don't believe me. The termination notice is waiting. Your mother called you a disgrace to the family name and said she didn't raise you to be a home-wrecking whore. And you have exactly 3 days to vacate your apartment before the sheriff physically removes you and your belongings onto the street." Gabrielle was hyperventilating now, fumbling for her phone with shaking hands that could barely hold the device. Florence sat perfectly still, like a statue, watching with detached interest like a scientist observing a fascinating experiment in human suffering. Florence stood up gracefully, placed 3 crisp $100 bills on the table, far more than necessary for her untouched meal. "This covers your lunch and gives the waiter a generous tip, since I imagine you're about to make quite a scene when reality finishes sinking in. Enjoy this meal, Gabrielle. It might be your last restaurant meal for quite a while, given your sudden unemployment and impending homelessness. Oh, and check your other email, the one from Matthew's attorney that arrived about 10 minutes ago." Gabrielle opened her email app with trembling fingers that kept hitting wrong keys, nearly dropping her phone twice from shaking so hard. There it was in bold letters. "Cease and desist letter from the law offices of Richardson and Black. Any contact whatsoever with Matthew Gilkes, including phone calls, text messages, emails, social media messages, or in-person contact, will result in immediate legal action. Restraining order to follow if this warning is not heeded." Gabrielle looked up with wild, desperate eyes, but Florence was already walking out of the restaurant with her head high and her shoulders back, every inch a queen leaving her former kingdom in ruins. The restaurant had gone completely silent. Every single person had heard everything, every diner, at every table, every waiter carrying food, every busboy clearing plates. They'd all witnessed the systematic destruction of a human being delivered in perfect calm by a woman in a white suit. Gabrielle vomited into her designer Kate Spade purse right there at the table in front of everyone. An older woman with silver hair at the next table leaned over, her voice deliberately loud enough for everyone in the restaurant to hear clearly. "Honey, whatever you did to that woman, you deserved every second of that. Every single second. You should be ashamed of yourself." Other diners murmured agreement. Someone actually started clapping slowly. Gabrielle wanted to die right there. She tried to pay for her meal, hands shaking so badly she could barely hold her credit card. The card reader beeped harshly, declined in red letters. She tried another card from her wallet, declined again. Derek had frozen all their accounts exactly 1 hour ago on his attorney's advice. She ran out sobbing with mascara and vomit on her designer blouse, leaving her purse behind, while the waiter chased her for payment and the manager called after her, threatening to call police. Outside in the parking lot, Florence sat in her Mercedes with the engine running and the air conditioning on full blast, watching through the restaurant's large windows as Gabrielle completely fell apart inside. She felt nothing, no satisfaction, No revenge high that she'd expected, no vindication or triumph, just cold confirmation that her carefully executed plan was working perfectly according to schedule. Her phone buzzed with an incoming text from Matthew. "What did you do? Gabrielle won't stop calling me, crying hysterically, and my lawyer said, 'You did something today. Florence, please answer me. Please.'" Florence deleted the text without responding and blocked his number. She put the car in gear and drove to her office downtown. She had an important client meeting in exactly 1 hour, and she needed to look absolutely perfect, needed to be sharp and brilliant and professional, because she was Florence Joyner, award-winning architect, and nothing, not cheating husbands, not backstabbing friends, not imploding lives and destroyed marriages, would ever make her miss a meeting or deliver anything less than absolute excellence. In the parking garage beneath her office building, she checked her reflection carefully in the rearview mirror, fixed her lipstick with precision, smoothed her hair with steady hands, took 3 deep breaths to center herself, applied a fresh coat of perfume. Then she got out of her car and walked into her office building like she hadn't just destroyed a woman's entire existence over a 10-minute lunch meeting. Because that's what powerful women did. They didn't break down. They broke other people with surgical precision. And they did it in white Chanel suits without spilling a single drop of blood or shedding a single tear. Chapter 4. The Empire Built on Lies. Matthew sat in his downtown corner office later that same afternoon, head buried in his hands, phone absolutely exploding with missed calls and text messages that kept making his phone vibrate non-stop. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city, but the brightness felt mocking and inappropriate for the darkness closing in around him like floodwater rising. His business partner, Richard, finally got through after Matthew had ignored dozens of calls from him. "Matthew, what in the actual hell did you do?" Richard's voice was beyond angry. It was the cold fury of someone whose entire livelihood was suddenly in immediate danger. "Richard, listen, I can explain everything if you just give me a minute. You've been using company investment funds to pay for hotel rooms with your mistress. You've been embezzling from our partnership to buy jewelry and expensive gifts for some random woman." Richard's voice was shaking with barely controlled rage. "I just got a file this morning from your wife's attorney. Everything documented with receipts and bank statements, every fraudulent expense highlighted, every personal charge you ran through our company accounts, thinking no one would notice or care." Matthew felt his world tilting like he was on a ship in a storm, losing all stability. "Richard, that's not what happened. Those expenses were legitimate business expenses for client entertainment. The SEC received the exact same documentation this morning at 9, Matthew, along with the State Attorney General's office at 9:30. I'm dissolving our partnership immediately effective today. I'm not going to federal prison because you couldn't keep your pants zipped and decided to fund your sordid affair with company money that didn't belong to you." The line went dead with harsh finality. Matthew tried calling back immediately, straight to voicemail. He tried calling their other 3 business partners. No one answered his calls. His calls had become poison that no one wanted to touch. He tried calling Florence, desperate to reach her. Voicemail. He tried again. Voicemail. He tried a 3rd time. Voicemail. His number was blocked completely. He drove to their house in the hills with shaking hands. The house they'd bought together 5 years ago, the house where they'd planned to raise children and grow old together. His hands were trembling so badly he could barely grip the steering wheel properly. When he arrived, his key didn't work in the lock. The locks had been changed sometime that morning. There was a handwritten note taped to their front door in Florence's elegant calligraphy script. "Beach House. You have until midnight tonight to sign the papers waiting there. If you don't sign by midnight, everything goes to the press tomorrow morning. Every photograph, every text message, every fraudulent expense. Choose wisely." Matthew drove to their Malibu beach property, speeding dangerously the whole way down the Pacific Coast Highway, running red lights, his mind racing faster than his car could possibly go. When he finally arrived, Florence was standing on the deck overlooking the Pacific Ocean, wearing the blue silk dress she'd worn on their very first date 8 years ago. The dress he'd told her made her look like a goddess descended from Mount Olympus. Matthew ran toward her across the sand, stumbling and desperate. "Baby, please, we can work through this together if you just talk to me." Florence turned slowly like she had all the time in the world, and her eyes were completely empty of anything warm, devoid of any love or affection or recognition he'd ever seen there before, like looking into the eyes of a beautiful statue carved from ice. "Work through what exactly, Matthew? The 7 months you spent inside my best friend while lying to my face? The company money you stole from your partners and from our accounts to pay for hotels and gifts and romantic weekend getaways? The board meeting where you actively sabotaged my hotel project because Gabrielle told you it would emasculate you if your wife was more successful than her husband?" Each word was a surgical strike, delivered with precision, cutting him apart, systematically, piece by piece. Matthew couldn't breathe properly. His chest felt tight, like someone was squeezing his heart with both hands. "Florence, I never meant for any of this to happen, you have to believe me. But it did happen, Matthew. You made choices. Every single day for 7 months you made deliberate choices." Florence's voice was terrifyingly calm, like she was explaining simple arithmetic to a particularly slow child. "You chose to text her good morning instead of me. You chose to spend our money on her instead of our future. You chose to sabotage my career to protect your fragile male ego. Every single choice was yours and yours alone. You don't get to pretend this just happened to you." She handed him a thick stack of papers, the divorce agreement heavy in his hands like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "Sign these. I get the house, this beach property, 70% of our assets, and full custody of any children from this marriage." Matthew's brain caught on something that didn't make any sense, a detail that seemed wrong. "Full custody of what children? We don't have any children. We've been trying to get pregnant for 2 years, but we don't have—" He stopped mid-sentence, looked at her, really looked at her. Florence's face revealed absolutely nothing, a perfect mask that gave away zero information. "Read the papers carefully, Matthew. You have until midnight tonight to sign before this becomes much worse for you than it already is." She walked past him into the beach house, her blue dress flowing in the ocean breeze like she was floating, leaving him standing there with divorce papers that mentioned children they didn't have. Or did they? Was she pregnant? When did it happen? Was it even his? Matthew's hand shook violently as he read through the legal documents, custody arrangements spelled out in detail, child support clauses with specific dollar amounts, visitation schedules broken down by days and weeks, all for children that didn't exist, unless they did exist, unless she was hiding something massive from him. He stumbled inside the beach house on unsteady legs. Florence was in the kitchen making tea like nothing earth-shattering had just happened, like she hadn't just destroyed his entire world in a single afternoon with surgical precision. "Florence, are you pregnant with my child?" She didn't look up from her tea preparation. "Sign the papers, Matthew. Answer me. Are you pregnant?" Florence finally looked directly at him, and her expression could freeze the sun itself, could stop the earth from rotating. "Why would I tell you anything? You've been inside another woman for 7 months. For all you know, you got her pregnant too. Maybe you should go ask Gabrielle about her symptoms. Oh wait, you can't. My cease and desist order means you'll face serious legal consequences if you contact her in any way." She walked upstairs with her tea, leaving him alone in the kitchen that smelled like the jasmine tea she always drank when she needed to calm her nerves. Matthew checked his phone frantically. Gabrielle had blocked him on absolutely everything, every social media platform, his phone number, his email address. He was completely alone, isolated, cut off from everyone who'd mattered to him. He sat down heavily at the kitchen table and read through the divorce papers line by line with a sinking heart. Florence's attorney had been thorough and brutal, every clause designed to protect her completely and destroy him systematically, every sentence proof that she'd been planning this for months while he'd been stupid enough to think he was getting away with something. His phone rang. His mother, Catherine. "Matthew, what have you done to that poor girl? Not what happened or are you okay or tell me your side. Just what have you done? Mum, it's complicated and you don't understand." "Florence sent me evidence of your affair today. She called me personally. She was kind and respectful, and she showed me exactly what my son had been doing for 7 months behind her back. His mother's voice was cold with disappointment that cut deeper than any anger. I'm ashamed of you. I didn't raise you to treat women like this. I didn't raise you to be exactly like your father. That last part hit him like a physical blow to the stomach. His father David had cheated on his mother Catherine for years when Matthew was growing up. Matthew had sworn on everything he held sacred that he'd never be like that. Never hurt someone the way his father had hurt his mother. Never become that kind of man, and he'd become exactly what he'd sworn he'd never be. Mom, please, I need your help right now. The only person who can help you now is yourself. Sign whatever Florence wants you to sign. She's being more than fair, considering she could destroy you completely and publicly if she wanted to. His mother's voice softened just slightly. And Matthew, if she's pregnant with your child, you'd better spend the rest of your entire life proving you can be a better father than you were a husband. The line went dead. Matthew sat alone in that beach house as the sun set over the Pacific Ocean, turning the sky orange and pink and purple. Colors that would have been beautiful and romantic if his entire life wasn't ending in front of his eyes. He picked up the pen Florence had left strategically next to the papers, and he signed everything, every single page, every clause, every word that took away his home, his money, his future, his life as he knew it. Because Florence had been absolutely right about one thing. She could make this so much worse than it already was. And if there was even the smallest chance she was carrying his child, he needed to do whatever it took to be in that child's life. He left the signed papers on the kitchen table and walked out of the beach house, leaving his keys on the counter. The house wasn't his anymore. Nothing was his anymore. Everything had been Florence's all along. He'd just been too blind to see it. Florence watched from the upstairs bedroom window as he drove away into the sunset, his taillights disappearing down the coast highway. She walked downstairs, picked up the signed papers, and called her attorney, James. He signed everything, she said quietly, hand going protectively to her stomach. That was faster than I expected, James replied, sounding genuinely surprised. He didn't even try to negotiate any terms. No, Florence agreed, her other hand joining the first on her stomach where her secret grew. He didn't try to negotiate at all. She hung up and stood on the deck overlooking the ocean, watching the waves crash violently against the rocks below. The sound was soothing, constant, reliable, predictable, unlike every person she'd ever trusted with her heart. Chapter 5. The Friends Who Chose Silence. A full week had passed since Matthew signed the divorce papers, and Florence was hosting what she'd called an intimate dinner party at the beach house. She'd invited 8 couples, 16 people total, every single one of them friends from their wealthy social circle who'd known about the affair for months and said absolutely nothing to her. Nobody knew why they were being summoned, but everyone came without question. Florence was architectural royalty now in their circles, and her systematic destruction of Matthew and Gabrielle had become legendary gossip at every country club and charity gala. People were terrified of her and fascinated by her in equal measure, like she was a beautiful, dangerous animal behind glass. Dinner was absolutely exquisite. Florence had hired the most expensive catering company in the entire state, wine flowing freely from bottles that cost hundreds of dollars each, perfectly cooked Maine lobster that melted on the tongue, aged Wagyu steaks that were tender as butter, classical music from Vivaldi and Bach floating through the air from hidden speakers throughout the house. Florence was the perfect gracious hostess in a stunning emerald Versace gown that made her dark skin glow like polished bronze, smiling warmly and asking thoughtful questions about people's children and expensive vacations and thriving businesses. Everyone was visibly nervous, but trying desperately to act normal, laughing too loud at jokes that weren't funny, drinking too fast, desperate to appear relaxed in the presence of the woman who destroyed 2 lives without breaking a sweat. After dessert and coffee, an elaborate chocolate soufflé that was absolute perfection, Florence stood elegantly and tapped her crystal wine glass with a silver spoon. The delicate chiming sound cut through all conversation immediately like a knife. I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. You've been such meaningful parts of our lives for so many years. Matthew and I have truly cherished your friendships. She smiled warmly, and people visibly relaxed their tense shoulders. I gathered you here because you all share something incredibly special with me. Something that bonds us together in a unique way that I'll never forget. She picked up a remote control from the sideboard. The lights dimmed smoothly. A projector screen descended slowly from the ceiling with a mechanical hum. You all knew my husband was having an affair with my best friend. Every single one of you knew for months, and not one single person told me. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Several people stopped breathing. The screen illuminated with high-definition security camera footage from an upscale steakhouse downtown, the date stamp showing 8 months ago. Matthew and Gabrielle in a corner booth, kissing passionately with visible tongue, his hand clearly up her skirt under the table. At the very next booth, clearly visible in the frame, Robert and Jennifer Harrison, two of tonight's guests, watching everything happen right in front of them and doing nothing. The video continued. Text message screenshots blown up huge on the screen. Jennifer to Matthew 3 months ago. You need to be way more careful. Florence asked about you at brunch yesterday, and I covered for you, but she seemed really suspicious. The room had gone deathly silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the plush carpet. Florence switched to another video, a recorded phone call between Matthew and his college friend Ryan. Matthew's voice filled the room through expensive speakers. Cover for me this weekend. Tell Florence we're going on that golf trip to Palm Springs we talked about. Ryan's response. Again, man. This is like the 3rd time this month. You're seriously playing with fire here. She's going to find out eventually. Matthew laughing. She won't find out if you keep your mouth shut like a good friend. Florence paused the playback with perfect timing. Looked directly at Ryan, who had turned grey as ash. You're a very good friend, Ryan. Just not my friend. She methodically went through each couple, each specific betrayal, each cover story, each direct lie told to Florence's face while they smiled and hugged her and pretended everything was fine. Video evidence, recorded phone calls, text messages, security footage from multiple locations. Florence had documented absolutely everything with frightening thoroughness. Some guests were openly crying now. Several tried to stand up and leave. Florence calmly blocked the dining room exit. Nobody leaves until I've finished. Sit back down. Her voice had gone quiet and cold, and it was infinitely more terrifying than if she'd screamed. People sat back down like chastised children being disciplined. Florence raised her wine glass high. A toast, everyone, to loyalty, to friendship, to all of you teaching me that silence is exactly the same as betrayal. May you all receive the same loyalty from your friends that you showed me when I needed you most. Robert Harrison tried to apologize, his voice breaking with genuine emotion. Florence, we didn't want to hurt you by telling you what was happening between them. Florence actually laughed, genuine, incredulous laughter that had an edge of hysteria. You didn't want to hurt me? Then what exactly were you trying to accomplish by staying silent? Protect me through ignorance? Let me continue being humiliated while you all watched? She was still laughing, and it was infinitely more frightening than anger would have been. You know what? Thank you, truly. Thank you all so much, because now I know exactly who my real friends are. She looked around the entire room slowly, making direct eye contact with each person, letting them see the cold fury burning in her eyes. Absolutely none of you. She opened the dining room doors wide, gesturing like a queen dismissing useless servants. Leave, all of you. Get out of my house immediately, and if I see any of your faces at my firm's events, my charity functions, or anywhere in my professional orbit, I will systematically ruin you the same way I ruined Matthew and Gabrielle. I have files on every single one of you now, every secret, every indiscretion, every questionable business deal, and I won't hesitate to use them. Now get out. They scattered like cockroaches when the lights come on, grabbing coats and purses desperately, some of them crying, all of them terrified. Cars started urgently in the driveway. Tires squealed on pavement. Within 5 minutes, the house was empty except for the catering staff quietly cleaning up and one person. Only one guest remained. James Whitmore, Matthew's former college roommate, still sitting calmly at the table with his wine glass, looking completely unperturbed. Florence turned to him, eyebrows raised. "Why are you still sitting here, James?" James met her eyes without flinching or looking away. "Because I didn't know until very recently. I was traveling extensively in Europe for work for most of the time this affair was happening. When I finally got back and found out what Matthew had done, I confronted him directly at his office. He lied straight to my face for 20 minutes, told me you were crazy and jealous and making things up. I stopped speaking to him that same day." Florence studied him carefully, her sharp instincts searching for any deception. "Why should I believe you?" "Because I brought my phone records, my passport, my travel documents, my flight itineraries." James pulled out a thick folder and slid it across the table. "I was literally out of the country when most of this affair was happening. And the day I found out and confronted Matthew, I secretly recorded the entire conversation. I have him on tape lying to me about what he did to you." Florence opened the folder slowly with careful hands. Everything was there, complete proof that James had been telling the absolute truth. "Why are you still sitting here?" she asked again, her voice softer this time. James looked at her with genuine remorse in his eyes. "Because you deserved so much better than what he gave you. You deserved loyalty and honesty and real love. And because I'm an attorney, Florence, if you need help destroying him legally and completely, I'll do it without charging you a single dollar. Consider it my apology for not being around to warn you before it went this far." Florence's expression softened slightly, the first crack in her armor all evening. She sat down across from him, suddenly exhausted. "I already have a lawyer. Then let me be your second lawyer, your third lawyer, whatever you need." James's voice was earnest, honest, unguarded. "Matthew was my friend for 15 years. But what he did to you is absolutely unforgivable, and I don't stand with men who destroy good women." Florence looked at this man, this friend of Matthew's who was willing to turn against him on principle alone. "You're hired," she said quietly. James nodded seriously. "What do you need me to do first?" Florence thought for a long moment. "Then, I need you to make absolutely certain that he can never come near me or my child without my explicit permission. I need ironclad custody arrangements that protect me. I need protection orders that actually mean something. Can you do that for me?" James's eyes widened slightly at the word child, but he didn't ask invasive questions. "I can do that. I'll start drafting documents tomorrow morning." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment while the catering staff cleaned up quietly around them with professional efficiency. "James," Florence said softly, "thank you for being honest with me. It's been so long since anyone was honest that I'd almost forgotten what it felt like." James just nodded with understanding, recognizing that sometimes the best response is respectful silence. After he left, Florence stood on the deck, overlooking the ocean, watching the moonlight dance on the water like scattered diamonds. She placed both hands protectively on her stomach, which was just starting to show the slightest curve beneath her gown. She'd lost her husband, lost her best friend, lost her entire social circle in one evening. But she'd gained something infinitely more valuable than any of that. Absolute clarity about who could be trusted and who couldn't. And in Florence's new world, that clarity was worth more than gold, more than diamonds, more than any friendship that was built on lies. Chapter 6. The Mother Who Saw Her Own Reflection. 2 full weeks after the disastrous dinner party that had everyone in their social circle talking, there was a knock at Florence's door early on a Saturday morning. She opened it, wearing comfortable yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, her hair in a messy bun, no makeup, the most casual anyone outside her immediate family had seen her in months. Standing on her doorstep, looking completely broken, was Catherine Gilkes, Matthew's mother, with 2 large packed suitcases and swollen red eyes behind designer sunglasses she was using to hide the evidence of crying. "May I please come in?" Catherine's voice was small and broken, nothing like the confident society woman Florence had known for years. They sat in Florence's pristine living room, with morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the canyon. Catherine's hands wouldn't stop shaking no matter how hard she tried. She gripped her expensive leather purse like it was the only thing keeping her anchored to earth. "I'm leaving, David." The words came out flat and final. Florence blinked in genuine surprise. David was Matthew's father, married to Catherine for over 3 decades. "What happened?" Catherine pulled off her sunglasses with trembling hands, revealing eyes that were red and swollen from hours of crying. "After you sent me that evidence about Matthew's affair, I called David, asked him directly if he knew about what his son was doing with Gabriel. He said yes, he'd known for months." Catherine's voice broke completely. "He said boys will be boys. He told me I was overreacting because Matthew was just sowing some late wild oats, that all men do it eventually and I needed to get over it. He told me to stop being so dramatic." Catherine's grip on her purse tightened until her knuckles went bone white. "I hung up on him. Then I called your investigator Morgan Reed and hired her myself without telling anyone." Florence sat up straighter, completely alert now. "You did what?" Catherine pulled out her own thick envelope from her purse, similar to the devastating one Morgan had delivered to Florence months ago. Morgan found 5 different women over the last 3 decades. 5 different women in different cities across the country. David had entire secret lives I knew nothing about. Second apartments I didn't know existed. Children that might actually be his from affairs I never suspected existed. Tears streamed down her face, ruining her expensive foundation completely. "I stayed silent for 30 years, Florence. 30 years. I taught my son that women forgive these things automatically, that we smile and endure and never complain, that we keep family secrets locked away in beautiful boxes and never let anyone see the rot underneath, that we protect men from the consequences of their own actions." Her voice was raw with self-loathing. "And look what I created, a man who destroys the woman who loves him because I taught him by example that this behavior is acceptable, that women are meant to suffer in silence and call it love." Florence moved beside her on the couch, took her trembling hand gently. "Catherine, you're not responsible for his choices." "Yes, I am." Catherine's voice cracked completely, all her sophisticated composure shattered. "I'm 62 years old, and a 30-something architect just showed me what dignity actually looks like. You didn't cry in public. You didn't beg him to stay. You became an absolute force of nature. You stood up and demanded respect. And I've been a doormat my entire adult life, teaching my son that doormat was all women could be." They cried together on that couch, 2 women from different generations, finding unexpected solidarity in the ruins of their marriages. Catherine's tears were decades of repressed pain finally escaping. Florence's tears were for the mother-in-law she'd thought she knew but had never really understood. Catherine asked quietly after they'd both composed themselves, "Can I stay here? Just until I figure out what comes next in my life?" Florence squeezed her hand. "Stay as long as you need to. This house has way too many empty rooms anyway. Consider it your home now." Over the following days, Catherine became Florence's unlikely ally and friend. They cooked together in the mornings, laughing over burned eggs and too strong coffee. They went for long walks on the beach in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. They healed together, 2 women who'd been betrayed by the men they'd loved unconditionally. Catherine revealed family secrets Florence had never known existed. Offshore trust funds Matthew had no knowledge of. Properties that were actually in Florence's name through obscure prenuptial clauses Catherine had quietly insisted on years ago. Investment portfolios Catherine had built in secret over decades, squirreling away money from her own inheritance that David couldn't touch. "These are yours," Catherine said one evening, handing Florence documents worth millions. Stock certificates, property deeds, account numbers. "I put them in your name years ago when you married Matthew. I told him they were educational trust funds for future grandchildren, but they're yours, completely yours, free and clear." He can't touch them even if he wanted to. Florence was speechless, staring at documents that represented financial security she hadn't even known she had. But why? Why would you do this for me? Catherine looked at her with profound sadness that came from decades of hard-earned wisdom. Because I saw myself in you from the very beginning, brilliant, strong, capable, far too good for my son. I didn't know when David's weakness would surface in Matthew, but I knew deep down it was there. Genetic, maybe, or learned behavior from watching his father. I didn't know when it would show itself, but I wanted you to have options when it inevitably did. Florence embraced her tightly, tears streaming down both their faces. You're not moving out. Ever. You're staying here. With me and this baby when he comes. Catherine pulled back, looked at Florence's belly that was just starting to show a gentle curve through her loose clothing. You're showing just slightly. How far along are you? Florence placed a protective hand over her stomach. Almost through the first trimester. It's a boy. Catherine touched Florence's belly gently, reverently, with the tenderness of a grandmother meeting her grandson for the first time. This baby is so incredibly lucky. He'll have a mother who doesn't break under pressure, a mother who stands up for herself, Florence whispered, covering Catherine's hand with her own, and a grandmother who finally learned how to stand up too. They both smiled, real, genuine smiles for the first time in what felt like years, smiles that weren't performances for society, smiles that came from actual happiness instead of obligation. That night they sat on the deck watching the sunset paint the sky in oranges and pinks, drinking herbal tea because Florence couldn't have wine, talking about names for the baby and nursery colors and all the hopeful things that pregnant women talk about when they're excited about the future. Have you told Matthew about the baby? Catherine asked carefully. Florence shook her head. No. He suspects because of the custody clauses in the divorce papers, but I haven't confirmed anything. Will you tell him eventually? Florence was quiet for a long moment, watching the sun sink into the Pacific. Eventually, when I'm ready, when the time is right, but not because he deserves to know. Only because my son deserves the chance to know his father, even if his father doesn't deserve to know him. Catherine nodded, understanding the important distinction. You're going to be an amazing mother, Florence. That baby has no idea how lucky he is. Florence hoped Catherine was right, because she was absolutely terrified of doing this alone, terrified of making mistakes, terrified of somehow failing this tiny person growing inside her. But she was also fiercely determined to give her son everything she hadn't received, loyalty, honesty, unconditional love that didn't come with betrayal as a side dish. And if Matthew wanted to be part of that child's life, he would have to earn it. Every single day, every single moment, because Florence Joyner didn't forgive easily anymore, and she definitely didn't forget. Chapter 7. The Man Who Lost His Entire World. Matthew was living in a depressing studio apartment in a neighborhood he used to drive past without even noticing it existed, the kind of place where sirens were constant background noise and security bars covered every single window like prison cells. His thriving business had collapsed entirely and completely. Every investor had pulled out after Florence's evidence circulated through their industry like wildfire. His partners had dissolved the company and were suing him personally. The SEC was actively investigating him for fraud and embezzlement. His bank accounts were frozen solid pending their investigation. Gabrielle had disappeared completely from the city. Last he'd heard through third-hand gossip from someone who'd heard from someone else. She'd moved back to her hometown somewhere in the Midwest, broken and unemployed, living with her parents who weren't speaking to her. Matthew was completely sober now for the first time in his adult life. No wine with dinner, no bourbon nightcaps, no champagne to celebrate anything. Complete total sobriety. The longest stretch he could remember since college. His therapist said he'd been self-medicating for years, using alcohol to numb feelings he didn't want to examine too closely. He attended intensive therapy 4 times a week now, brutal sessions where his therapist made him examine every choice, every action, every moment that had led to the complete destruction of his life and marriage. He worked construction for his father's company now, doing backbreaking manual labor for barely above minimum wage. His father, David, barely spoke to him anymore after Catherine left and exposed everything about David's own affairs. Matthew spent his days carrying heavy lumber, mixing concrete until his arms screamed, working until his muscles screamed and his hands bled through his work gloves. Matthew called Florence every single day without fail. She never answered. Never. Not once in 3 months. He wrote her letters constantly, pouring his heart onto paper in handwriting that got shakier as the weeks passed. No response ever came. The letters disappeared into a black void. He'd lost 30 pounds, stopped shaving regularly, stopped caring about his appearance entirely. The man who'd once spent hundreds on haircuts at exclusive salons now cut his own hair with cheap kitchen scissors. The man who'd once worn only custom-made suits now wore the same 3 construction work outfits on rotation until they fell apart. His therapist had asked him recently during a particularly difficult session, "Why do you keep trying to reach her when she's made it abundantly clear she's done with you?" Matthew's answer had come slowly, carefully, after long minutes of uncomfortable silence. "Because I deserve to suffer. And maybe if I suffer long enough and change deeply enough, I'll become someone who's worthy of asking for forgiveness, not receiving it. I don't expect to receive it ever, just worthy of asking." One day in his 6th month of living in hell, Matthew was at a coffee shop trying to make a single cup of coffee last for hours so he could use their Wi-Fi to look for better jobs, when he saw Florence's architectural firm featured prominently on the front page of the business section. Revolutionary affordable housing project breaking ground, changing the city's skyline forever, bringing hope to underserved communities. There was a large color photograph of Florence, in a hard hat and safety vest, absolutely radiant and visibly pregnant, standing in front of her creation with her head high and her hand protectively on her rounded belly. Matthew stared at that photograph for what felt like hours, his coffee going completely cold in front of him. His baby, his child, growing inside her while he lived like this, while he suffered like this, while he tried desperately to become something better than what he'd been. He drove to the beach house that night after his construction shift ended. Didn't knock, didn't call first. Just sat outside the locked gate with flowers he could barely afford. Cheap grocery store flowers, nothing like the expensive arrangements he used to buy her from exclusive florists. He stayed there for hours in complete silence, just sitting in his beat-up truck with the flowers on his passenger seat. Then he left the flowers carefully by the gate and drove away into the darkness. Inside, Florence watched from the upstairs window, hand protectively on her rounded belly where her son was moving. Catherine appeared beside her, concern on her face. "He's been coming every single week now, same night, same time. Just sits there for a few hours and leaves flowers." Catherine kept her voice carefully neutral, not pushing Florence in any direction. Florence said nothing at all, just watched the taillights of Matthew's truck disappear down the coastal highway. Catherine asked gently, "Do you want me to call the police? Get a restraining order? I will if you want me to." Florence, still watching the empty street where his taillights had been, "No." Catherine pressed carefully, knowing she was walking on very thin ice. "Do you still love him somewhere deep down in your heart?" Florence finally turned from the window, hand still protectively on her belly where her son was kicking. "I don't even know what I feel anymore, Catherine. I loved who he was. I hate who he became. And I'm terrified of being weak enough to eventually forgive him when he doesn't deserve forgiveness." Catherine put a comforting arm around her, maternal and warm. "Forgiveness isn't weakness, sweetheart. Making him earn every single piece of it back over years, that's real power." Florence looked down at her growing belly, feeling her son move beneath her hand. "He doesn't even know if it's a boy or a girl. He doesn't know his name. He doesn't know anything about his own child." Catherine asked the question carefully. Do you want him to know? Florence didn't answer. She just looked at the cheap, wilted grocery store flowers sitting by her gate, and she didn't throw them away like she had the first few times months ago. She collected them instead, brought them inside, put them in a vase with fresh water, and she hated herself a little bit for that weakness, for that crack in her armor, for still caring at all. Chapter 8. The Woman Carrying Everything. Florence was deep into her pregnancy now at 7 months, belly round and prominent, her son active and strong inside her. She was in the nursery painting walls, soft yellow, while Catherine helped assemble complicated furniture. Her sister Diane had flown in from across the country for the week, and they were laughing together over paint splotches and assembly instructions that made absolutely no sense. They were planning the baby shower together, debating names seriously, arguing good-naturedly about whether to go with traditional or modern decor. During the day, surrounded by people who loved her unconditionally, Florence felt strong and capable and ready to be a mother. But at night, alone in her bed with her son kicking powerfully against her ribs and keeping her awake, something inside her broke open completely. She'd been storing Matthew's letters unopened in a locked drawer for months. Dozens and dozens of them, delivered to her lawyer's office and forwarded to her house, still sealed in their envelopes collecting dust. Tonight, 7 months pregnant and unable to sleep because her son wouldn't stop moving and kicking, Florence pulled out those letters with trembling hands. Her hands shook as she opened the first one, postmarked from many months ago. Florence, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't deserve for you to. But I need you to understand something. I destroyed the best thing in my life because I was a coward. You were perfect. You are perfect. And I couldn't handle being Mr. Florence Joyner. I'm so sorry I was too weak to be worthy of you. She opened one from the middle of the pile, her vision blurring with tears. I'm in real therapy now. Not the kind where I go once a month and talk about surface feelings. Real intensive therapy 4 times a week. My therapist asked me why I cheated. I said I felt small next to your success. She asked what I did to address that feeling. I said I found someone who made me feel big. She asked if it worked. I said no. Because every single time I was with Gabrielle, I thought about you. And I hated myself more. Every time I touched her, I was thinking about you. Every time I lied to you, I despised myself. And instead of stopping, I kept destroying everything good because I was too cowardly to face what I'd done. She opened the most recent letter, from just days ago, and the words absolutely destroyed her. Florence, I'm not writing these to win you back anymore. I'm not even writing for you to forgive me. I'm writing because you showed me what integrity actually looks like, and I had none. You showed me what real strength looks like, and I had none. You showed me what unconditional love looks like, and I threw it away for cheap validation. I'm becoming the man I should have been when we met. Not for you, for myself, and for our child, if you ever let me meet them. Thank you for destroying me completely. I genuinely needed it. You deserve so much better. You still do. I hope our child gets your strength and not my weakness. Florence was crying now, both hands on her belly as her son kicked and rolled, like he could sense her distress and was trying to comfort her from the inside. Diane came in to check on her, saw letters scattered everywhere across the bed like fallen leaves. You still love him, don't you? Florence wiped her eyes, but the tears kept coming in rivers. Part of me will always love the man I married, but that man doesn't exist anymore, Diane. This Matthew, the broken one writing these letters, I don't know if he's genuinely changed or if he's just performing redemption because his life fell apart. Diane sat beside her sister on the bed, careful not to disturb the letters spread like evidence across the comforter. There's only one way to find out the truth, Florence. Florence looked at her sister through tears. What are you suggesting? Diane spoke carefully, measuring each word. Let him meet his son when the time comes. Set brutal, unforgiving terms. Make him earn every single second. Don't forgive him. Don't take him back. But Florence, That baby deserves a chance to have a father, even if Matthew doesn't deserve the chance to be one. Florence looked down at her belly. Her son kicked hard against her hands, like he was casting his own vote in this decision, like he was saying, let him try. She closed her eyes and didn't answer her sister, because she didn't know what the right answer was. She didn't know if there even was a right answer. All she knew was that she was terrified. Terrified of being too hard. Terrified of being too soft. Terrified of making the wrong choice for her son. And terrified that part of her desperately wanted to see Matthew again, wanted to give him a chance, wanted to believe people could fundamentally change. That terrified her most of all, because believing in him again felt like the most dangerous thing she could possibly do. Chapter 9. The Test. He didn't know he was taking. Late one night in her 8th month of pregnancy, Florence's water heater broke with a sound like a small explosion that echoed through the entire house. She was completely alone. Catherine was out of town handling final divorce proceedings from David. Diane had flown home last week. The house was absolutely freezing within an hour. Florence was heavily pregnant now, uncomfortable and huge, too big to maneuver into the tight utility closet to fix it herself, despite all her architectural knowledge of building systems and plumbing. She sat on the cold bathroom floor in her warmest robe, frustrated tears streaming down her face. She was freezing and pregnant and alone, and everything hurt, and she just wanted hot water for a shower. Her phone rang unexpectedly. Blocked number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her press accept. It was Matthew, his voice anxious. "Florence, I'm so sorry to call. I know you don't want to hear from me. But I drove past the house on my way home from my construction job and saw every single light on this late at night, and I just needed to make sure you're okay. That's all. Just needed to know you're safe." Florence, crying from sheer frustration and cold and pregnancy hormones she couldn't control. "My water heater broke and I'm freezing, and I can't fix it because I'm enormous and I can't reach anything, and I'm just so tired of everything." Matthew interrupted, his voice urgent but controlled. "I'm sitting outside your gate right now. Please let me help. Just this one thing. Then I'll leave immediately, I swear. I won't try to talk to you about us or anything. Please, Florence." Florence, exhausted beyond reason, beyond pride, beyond caring. "Fine. The security code is still the same." She buzzed the gate open. Matthew came in quickly with a toolbox she didn't even know he owned. Months of construction work had taught him practical skills he'd never had before, skills he'd been too wealthy and privileged to bother learning. It took him over an hour in the cramped utility room, but he fixed the heating system properly and completely, not just a temporary patch. He didn't try to make conversation except to ask necessary technical questions about the system. When he finally finished, he washed his hands silently at the kitchen sink, packed his tools without a single word. Florence watched him from the kitchen doorway, one hand on her massive belly. "Thank you." Matthew nodded, not quite meeting her eyes like he was afraid. "Anytime you need help with anything, plumbing, electrical, anything broken, just call me. I mean that sincerely. You don't have to talk to me. Just text me what's broken and I'll come fix it immediately." He turned to leave, then stopped. Turned back slowly, like he was fighting with himself internally. "Florence, is that my baby?" Florence's hand instinctively went to her belly, protective. Long, heavy silence filled the kitchen like rising water. "Yes." Matthew's eyes immediately filled with tears that he tried desperately to hold back. "Boy or girl?" "Boy." Matthew covered his mouth with both hands, silent sobs shaking his shoulders violently. His whole body trembled like he was falling apart from the inside. "Can I feel him move, just once, please? I swear I won't ask for anything else ever again." Florence knew she should refuse. Wanted to refuse. Every rational part of her brain screamed to refuse. But something fundamental softened inside her chest. Something she thought had died months ago. She nodded once. Matthew approached her like she was made of the most delicate glass in existence, like one wrong move would shatter everything forever. He knelt in front of her carefully, his work-roughened hands hovering near her belly, not touching until she gave explicit permission. Florence took his hand gently and placed it on the side of her belly where their son was most active. The baby kicked powerfully, hard, directly into Matthew's palm. Matthew completely broke down, crying into her stomach, his tears soaking through her robe. I'm so sorry I wasn't there for any of this. I'm so sorry for everything I destroyed. Everything. I'm so sorry. Florence's hand hovered over his head. She almost touched his hair, almost forgave him completely in that moment, almost let everything go, but she stopped herself, pulled her hand back sharply, stepped away from him. You need to leave now, Matthew. He nodded, stood up on shaky legs, wiped his face with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Thank you for letting me feel him. That was more than I deserved. So much more. He left quickly, grabbing his toolbox, nearly running to his truck like he was escaping. Florence locked the door behind him, slid down it slowly, and cried harder than she had in months. Cried for the man she'd loved. Cried for the man he'd become. Cried for the complicated mess her feelings had become. Because part of her had desperately wanted him to stay, and that terrified her more than anything. Several days later, Florence was grocery shopping at an upscale market when she rounded a corner and nearly collided with someone. She looked up. It was Gabriel, looking absolutely skeletal and haunted, wearing discount store clothes that hung off her thin frame, pushing a cart with generic brand items. They froze, staring at each other. Gabrielle looked ready to run immediately. Florence should walk away, should pretend this woman didn't exist. But curiosity or something darker made her speak. Gabrielle. Gabrielle's voice was barely a whisper, broken and terrified. Florence, please, I'm not trying to bother you. I'll leave right now. You look terrible. Florence's voice was flat, observational, like she was noting the weather. Gabrielle's eyes filled with tears instantly. I've been sick. The stress, the drinking after everything fell apart. I'm trying to get healthy again, but it's hard and... She stopped, looking at Florence's pregnant belly with such raw pain that even Florence felt a flicker of something. Not pity, just acknowledgement of suffering. Is that his baby? Gabrielle asked, immediately regretting it. That's none of your concern whatsoever. Florence's voice turned to ice instantly. I know, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. Gabrielle was crying openly now in the middle of the grocery store, not even trying to hide it anymore. I was jealous of you, of everything you were that I could never be, and I tried to take what was yours because I couldn't build my own life. I destroyed myself trying to destroy you. Florence looked at this broken shell of the woman who'd once been her best friend. Felt nothing, no satisfaction, no pity, nothing. You didn't destroy me, Gabrielle. You freed me. You showed me who you really were, who he really was, who all of them really were. So thank you, actually. Thank you for showing me the truth before I wasted more years on people who didn't deserve them. Gabrielle looked stunned, like Florence had slapped her hard. Florence leaned in slightly, voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. But if you ever come near my husband, my child, or my life again, I promise you'll discover that what I did to you before was mercy compared to what I'm capable of now. Are we absolutely clear? She walked away without another word, got in her car, sat there shaking violently. Then she called Matthew without thinking. He answered immediately, like his phone was always in his hand waiting. Florence, is everything okay? Is the baby okay? Florence, surprising herself with her own words. I just saw Gabriel at the grocery store. Matthew's voice went cold as winter. Where exactly? Did she approach you? If she threatened you in any way, I swear. Florence, oddly touched by his immediate protectiveness. She looked destroyed, sick, broken, living on generic groceries in discount clothes. Long silence. Then Matthew. Good. She helped me ruin everything. I'm glad she's suffering too. Does that make me a bad person? Florence, almost smiling despite everything. It makes you honest. Matthew. Florence, I'm in therapy 4 times a week. I'm completely sober for the first time in my life. I'm trying to change. But I can't promise perfection because I already broke every promise I ever made. All I know is I'm trying. And even if you never forgive me, I'm still going to keep becoming better. For our son. For myself. Florence, voice cracking. His name is David. David Matthew Gilkes, after your grandfather. Matthew started crying. Couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Florence, her voice softer than it had been in months. If you want to be in his life when he's born, I need terms. Brutal ones. Terms you won't like. Matthew, through tears. Whatever you want, for however long. I'll do absolutely anything. Florence, we'll discuss it when the time comes. Don't mess this up, Matthew. She hung up before he could respond. And she sat in her car in that grocery store parking lot, hands on her belly where David was kicking strongly, and wondered if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life or the bravest decision. She honestly didn't know which. That is an excellent observation. While Chapter 10 delivers the essential emotional climax, its length is slightly disproportionate to the weight of the previous chapters, making the final titanium agreement feel a bit rushed. Chapter 10. The Titanium Vow. Florence woke to intense contractions at 2 in the morning, a sudden, all-consuming pain that ripped the breath from her lungs. She clutched her belly and shouted for Catherine, whose door was already opening. "Catherine, it's time, now!" Catherine moved with the efficient calm of a general. She called 911, then dialed a number without hesitation. Matthew answered instantly, his voice ragged. "Catherine, she's in labor. Get to Mercy Hospital now. I'm coming." He arrived 20 minutes later, looking like a man who had run through fire. A nurse found him pacing the waiting area, his construction clothes streaked with dirt and concrete dust, and led him down the hall. He stopped at the delivery room door, fear radiating off him. Florence, pale and gripping the bed rails, turned her head and locked eyes with him. "Get in here right now, you idiot!" He scrambled to her side, taking the hand she offered. She squeezed with bone-crushing force, nearly breaking his fingers. "I hate you," she gasped as a contraction peaked. "I know," Matthew said, tears already streaming down his face. "I'm so angry at you for making me do this alone." "I know that too, Florence. I'm so sorry." He didn't leave her side for hours. He breathed with her when she needed grounding and stepped back when she needed space. He absorbed her rage, the pain she poured into his hand, and the weight of every unspoken regret without complaint. At dawn, David Matthew Gilkes entered the world, perfect, healthy, and breathtakingly alive. The doctor placed him on Florence's chest. She cried with exhaustion and awe, utterly transformed. Matthew stood back, hands clasped behind him, not daring to presume. Florence looked at him, her gaze steady and absolute, drawing a new boundary into existence. "Do you want to hold your son?" Matthew's face crumpled. "Am I allowed to?" She nodded once. He took David with trembling, calloused hands and bowed his head, sobbing quietly against the tiny infant. His entire body shook. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there," he whispered. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving I can be your father." Hours later, in the recovery room washed with the soft light of morning, Florence delivered her final terms. Matthew sat across from her with a lukewarm cup of coffee, exhaustion and humility etched deep into his face. David slept beside her in the bassinet. "These are the terms, Matthew," Florence said calmly. "This is not a negotiation. This is a covenant. It is the price of admission to our son's life." She spoke slowly, deliberately, never breaking eye contact. All visitation would be supervised by Catherine or James Whitmore for the first 2 years. No exceptions, no arguments. He would continue intensive therapy 4 times a week, attend weekly AA meetings, and submit to random unannounced drug and alcohol testing at her discretion. One failure would mean permanent loss of visitation. He would live solely on income earned from his construction job. Any funds from his family would be disclosed immediately and placed into an account controlled by James for David's future. Florence would have complete and permanent access to his finances. They would live separately for 7 years, not 2, not 5. He would not have a key. He would not stay overnight. He would not disrupt the foundation she was building for their son. Matthew listened to every word without interruption. "I accept completely," he said quietly, "every single term, for however long it takes." Florence leaned forward, exhaustion giving way to terrifying clarity. "This isn't about earning me back. That woman is gone. This is about earning the right to be his father. I will never compromise my son's well-being for your redemption." Matthew stepped closer to the bed, his head bowed. "If I do everything right, if I become the man you deserved, is there any chance that we might— Look at me, Matthew." He raised his head. "I am no longer the woman you married," she said evenly. "I am harder now. I am built of something unforgiving, something that doesn't melt, doesn't bend, and doesn't forget. I am built of titanium. Can you love this version of me? Can you stand beside a woman who will never fully trust you again?" Matthew looked at her, the woman forged by betrayal, the mother guarding her child like a fortress, and nodded. "You're not cold," he said. "You're titanium, and I'll spend my life proving I can stand behind someone that strong. You deserve a kingdom. This penance is the least I can give." Florence rested her hand on David's head. "Then that's where you'll be," she said. "Behind me, supporting me for years, maybe forever. You get one chance. One." Matthew placed his trembling hand beside hers on the bassinet rail. "I won't," he swore, "on his life." Florence met his eyes one final time. The corner of her mouth lifted, not the smile of a wife, but of a queen. "Good," she said, "because the woman you knew is dead. The one who replaced her is an architect. She builds things that last forever. And if you ever threaten my foundation again, I will burn down the titanium fortress I built and leave you standing alone in the ashes." The titanium vow was complete. The rest of his life had begun.